A woman stood in the dirt, unwanted and unnamed, about to be thrown back into the nothing she came from. The rancher who bought her sister stared her down like livestock that failed inspection. She had one chance, one breath, to prove she wasn't a mistake. But how do you convince a man you're worth keeping when even your own family traded you away? This is the story of Ara Vance, the woman no one wanted, until she became the one nobody could break. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach door swung open and Ara Vance didn't move. She sat inside the cramped compartment, hands folded in her lap, staring at the rectangle of blinding afternoon light that framed a world she didn't recognize. Dust hung in the air like flour through a sieve. The driver was already unhitching luggage, metal buckles clanging against wood. But Ara stayed frozen on the bench seat, her spine pressed against cracked leather. "You getting out or staying in there till sundown?" the driver barked. She forced herself to stand. Her legs had gone numb somewhere between the last water stop and here, wherever here was. The hem of her dress caught on a nail as she stepped down, ripping a 3-inch tear along the seam. She didn't bother looking at it. The town wasn't a town. It was a scatter of buildings huddled against the plains like they were trying not to be noticed. A general store, a blacksmith, something that might have been a saloon. Everything looked temporary, as if the wind could reclaim it all by morning. "Mercer Ranch?" Ara asked. The driver pointed west without looking up. 4 miles that way. Road'll take you straight to it." 4 miles. "On foot if you're asking." He dropped her trunk onto the ground hard enough to crack the latch. "No wagon service out that far." Ara looked at the trunk, then at the road. The sun was already leaning westward, casting long shadows across the dirt. 4 miles. She'd never walked 4 miles in her life. Back in Philadelphia, 4 miles would have taken her through 3 neighborhoods and past the river. Here, it looked like 4 miles of absolutely nothing. She reached for the trunk handle. "You sure you got the right place?" The driver was watching her now, something close to pity in his weathered face. "I'm sure." "Don't look like ranch folk." "I'm not." He shrugged and climbed back onto the driver's seat. The stagecoach rolled away in a cloud of dust, and Ara stood alone in the middle of the unnamed town with a broken trunk and a contract she'd never signed. The trunk was heavier than it looked. Ara dragged it 20 yards before her palms started to blister. She switched to carrying it, which lasted another 50 yards before her arms gave out. She tried pushing it, pulling it sideways. Nothing worked. The road was packed dirt turned to powder, and the trunk carved a shallow trench behind her like a plow. By the time the sun touched the horizon, she'd made it less than a mile. She sat down on the trunk and looked back toward town. It was already dissolving into the heat shimmer, unreal as a mirage. Ahead, the road stretched into emptiness. No trees, no buildings, just flat land and the kind of sky that made you feel like an ant. Her hands were bleeding. She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and wrapped it around her right palm, then realized she didn't have another one for the left. The fabric soaked through immediately, a dark stain spreading across the white cotton. She should have stayed in Philadelphia. The thought came automatically, the way it had every hour since she'd left. She should have refused. She should have fought harder. She should have told her father exactly what kind of man he was for doing this. But she hadn't, and now she was here. Ara stood and gripped the trunk handle again. The blister on her thumb popped. She kept walking. The ranch appeared just as the last light bled out of the sky. She saw the buildings first, low structures clustered around a main house, everything built from the same dark wood that looked almost black in the twilight. Smoke rose from a chimney. Lamplight glowed in 2 windows. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnied. Ara stopped at the edge of the property, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her dress was filthy, torn at the hem and sleeves. Her hair had come loose from its pins hours ago and now hung in damp strands against her neck. Blood had soaked through the handkerchief and dried in brown streaks across her palm. She looked like something the road had chewed up and spit out. The front door of the main house opened. A man stepped onto the porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that had seen better days. He stood with his weight on one leg, one hand resting on the porch rail, and even from 30 yards away, Ara could feel the weight of his stare. This was Cade Mercer. She'd never seen a photograph. The marriage contract her father had signed, on her sister's behalf, not hers, hadn't included one. She knew his age, 32. She knew he owned a cattle ranch in Wyoming territory. She knew he'd paid her father $300 for a wife. That was all she knew. She picked up the trunk and walked toward the house. Cade didn't move. He watched her approach the way you'd watch a stray dog wandering onto your property. Not hostile, but not welcoming either, just waiting to see what it would do. Ada stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Mr. Mercer. That's right. His voice was lower than she expected, rough, like he didn't use it much. I'm Ara Vance. Silence. Cade's expression didn't change. He looked at her the way you'd look at a ledger that didn't add up. You're not Sienna. No. The contract was for Sienna Vance. I know. So where is she? Ara's throat tightened. She'd practiced this conversation 100 times on the stagecoach. She'd imagined different versions, different words, different outcomes. None of them had felt this cold. She's not coming. Why not? She refused. Cade's jaw tightened. And you are? Her sister. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. Her sister. Yes. Did your father think I wouldn't notice? I don't know what my father thought. You don't know. Cade came down the steps slowly, like he was approaching something that might bolt. He stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were dark, brown or maybe gray, hard to tell in the fading light. You came all the way out here and you don't know what your father thought? No. Did he send a letter? An explanation? No. Did you agree to this? Ada hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? The one she'd been avoiding since Philadelphia. It doesn't matter if I agreed. It matters to me. Why? Because I paid for a wife, not... He stopped himself, but the words hung in the air anyway. Not you. Ada felt something crack open inside her chest. Not surprise, not even hurt, just a hollow kind of confirmation. She'd known this would happen. She'd known exactly how this would go. The contract didn't specify which daughter, she said quietly. The hell it didn't. It said Vance daughter. That's all. Cade stared at her like she'd just insulted him in a language he barely understood. You think that's how this works? I think it's what the contract says. I don't care what the contract says. I asked for Sienna. I negotiated with your father based on... He stopped again. And this time Ada saw it. The flicker of something almost embarrassed. I'm sending you back. There's nowhere to send me back to. Then I'll send you to town. You can take the next stage east. I don't have money for a stage. That's not my problem. Then what is? The words came out sharper than she intended. You paid for a wife. I'm here. The contract's fulfilled. You're not what I paid for. I'm what you got. They stared at each other. Somewhere behind the house, a dog barked. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of livestock and dust. Cade shook his head. This is insane. I agree. You can't just... He gestured at her, frustrated. You can't just show up and expect... I don't expect anything. Then why are you here? Ada's hands were shaking. She curled them into fists, feeling the broken blister pull. Because I didn't have a choice. Something in Cade's expression shifted. Not softening, nothing about him was soft, but something like recognition, like he'd heard the truth under the words. He turned away from her and walked back up the porch steps. You can stay tonight, he said without looking back. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do with you. Then he went inside and shut the door. Ticked. Ara stood in the dark for a full minute before she realized she was supposed to follow. She climbed the steps and pushed the door open. The house was smaller than she expected. One main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, and 2 doors that probably led to bedrooms. Everything was clean but worn, the kind of place where function mattered more than appearance. Cade was standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames. There's a room in the back, he said. You can sleep there. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's not charity. Ada didn't respond. She picked up her trunk and dragged it toward the back room. The door stuck when she tried to open it, swollen from humidity or age. She had to put her shoulder into it. The room was barely big enough for the narrow bed and a chest of drawers. No mirror, no curtains. A single window looked out onto nothing. She set the trunk down and sat on the bed. The mattress was thin, The frame creaked, but it was better than the stagecoach. Better than the road. Through the wall, she could hear Cade moving around. The scrape of a chair, the clink of glass, footsteps crossing the floor. She should unpack. She should clean herself up. She should do something. Instead, she lay down on the bed, still wearing her filthy dress, and stared at the ceiling. "You're not what I paid for." The words circled in her head like crows. She'd known this would happen. From the moment her father had told her about the switch, she'd known. Sienna was the beautiful one. Sienna was the one men wrote letters about, sent photographs for. Sienna was the one worth $300. Ara was just the spare, the backup plan, the mistake. She closed her eyes and waited for sleep that wouldn't come. But she woke to the sound of voices. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The walls were too close. Then it came back in a rush. The stagecoach, the road, Cade's face when he realized she wasn't Sienna. The voices were coming from outside. Men's voices, rough and overlapping. Ara sat up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her hands were stiff, the blisters cracked and oozing. Her shoulders felt like someone had beaten them with a plank. She stood anyway and went to the window. The sun was barely up, the sky still gray at the edges. In the yard, 5 or 6 men stood in a loose circle around Cade. Ranch hands, she guessed. They all had the same look, lean, weathered, hard. The kind of men who worked with their hands and didn't waste words. Cade was talking, his voice too low to make out. One of the men laughed. Another spat into the dirt. Then one of them looked toward the house. Ara stepped back from the window, but it was too late. The man had seen her. He said something to the others and they all turned to look. She felt their stares like physical weight. Cade glanced back at the house, then said something sharp to the men. They dispersed slowly, reluctantly, like dogs being called off. Ara moved away from the window and sat back down on the bed. So they knew. Of course they knew. Cade had probably told them last night. The woman who showed up isn't the one I wanted. Don't know what to do with her yet. She wondered if they were placing bets on how long she'd last. Quote, she didn't leave the room until she heard the front door close. When she came out, Cade was gone. The main room was empty except for the lingering smell of coffee. On the table, someone had left a plate with 2 biscuits and a piece of dried meat. Ara stared at it for a long moment, trying to decide if it was meant for her or if Cade had just forgotten to clear his breakfast. She ate it anyway. The biscuits were hard. The meat was saltier than anything she'd ever tasted, but it was food. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. When she finished, she washed the plate in the basin by the kitchen and set it on the counter to dry. Then she stood in the middle of the room, unsure what to do next. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Back in Philadelphia, there was always noise. Carriages in the street, neighbors arguing through thin walls, her father's footsteps on the stairs. Here, the silence felt thick enough to drown in. She went back to her room and opened the trunk. Most of what she'd brought was useless. 3 dresses suitable for church or social calls, a pair of dancing slippers, a hat with silk flowers, things that belonged to the life she'd left behind. At the bottom, wrapped in newspaper, she found the one practical thing she owned, a pair of her mother's work gloves. She pulled them on. They were too big, but they'd protect her hands. Then she went outside. The ranch was bigger than it had looked in the dark. Ara counted 6 buildings aside from the main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, 2 storage sheds, something that might have been a smokehouse, and a long, low structure she couldn't identify. Fences crisscrossed the property in rough lines, corralling cattle and horses. Everything smelled like animals and hay and manure. She walked toward the barn, trying to look purposeful. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with the smell of horses and leather. Stalls lined both sides. Most were empty, but 3 horses stood near the back, watching her with dark, incurious eyes. You lost? Ara spun around. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by morning sun, older than Cade, maybe 50, with a gray beard and a limp. I was just... Ara started, then stopped. She didn't know what she was doing. Looking around? Yes. The man limped into the barn and picked up a bridle hanging on the wall. Name's Hatch. I run the horses. Ara Vance. I know who you are. He didn't say it unkindly, just matter of fact. Whole ranch knows. I'm sure they do. Hatch glanced at her, then at her hands. Those your mother's gloves? Otto looked down. How did you... Seen gloves like that before? Wrong size for you. They're all I have. Hatch nodded slowly, like that explained something. He hung the bridle on a hook and pulled down a different one. You know anything about horses? No. Cattle? No. Cooking, cleaning, sewing? Some. Some. Hatch almost smiled. Well, you're honest, at least. Is that worth anything here? More than you'd think. He carried the bridle toward the back of the barn. Cade talked to you yet? Last night. What'd he say? That he's sending me back. He say when? No. Hatch made a sound that might have been a laugh. That means he hasn't decided. Decided what? Whether you're worth the trouble. Ada felt her jaw tighten. And what do you think? Hatch stopped and looked at her properly for the first time. His eyes were pale blue, the kind that looked like they'd seen everything and weren't impressed by most of it. I think you walked 4 miles in city shoes carrying a trunk that weighs more than you do, he said. That's either stupid or stubborn, maybe both. Which one's better? Out here? Stubborn. He turned back to the horses. Stupid gets you killed. So, Ara spent the rest of the morning trying to make herself useful. She cleaned the main house, even though it didn't need cleaning. She swept the floors, wiped down the counters, organized the canned goods in the pantry. It was make work, the kind of thing you did when you needed to feel productive, but it was better than sitting in her room. Around noon, Cade came back. He stopped in the doorway and looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. You didn't have to do this, he said. I know. I'm still sending you back. I know that too. He stood there for a moment, caught between leaving and staying. Finally, he walked to the kitchen and poured himself a cup of water from the pitcher. Hatch said you were in the barn this morning. I was looking around. Looking for what? I don't know. Something to do. Cade drank the water in 3 long swallows. There's plenty to do. That's not the problem. Then what is? He set the cup down harder than necessary. The problem is you're not supposed to be here. I know. Stop saying that. What do you want me to say? I want you to... He stopped, frustrated. I want you to explain why your father thought he could send you instead of your sister, and I wouldn't notice. He probably thought you wouldn't care. Well, I do. Why? The question caught him off guard. He stared at her like she'd asked something offensive. Why do I care? Yes. You paid for a wife. You got one. What difference does it make which sister showed up? It makes all the difference. Because Sienna's prettier? Cade's face darkened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the table between them like a barricade. Your sister and I exchanged letters, Cade said finally. 6 months' worth. I told her about the ranch. She told me about Philadelphia. He stopped, choosing his words carefully. We had an understanding. An understanding. Yes. And you think I can't understand the same thing she did? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Cade shook his head. This conversation is pointless. I agree, so stop having it. Excuse me? Ara pulled off her mother's gloves and dropped them on the table. Her hands were a mess. Blisters, cuts, dried blood. You want to send me back, she said. But until you do, I'm here, and I'm not going to sit in that room and wait for you to decide what to do with me. What are you going to do instead? Whatever needs doing. Cade looked at her hands, then at her face. Something shifted in his expression, not approval, but maybe a fraction less hostility. You ever worked a day in your life? No. Then you'll slow us down. Probably. And you'll complain. I won't. Everyone complains. Not me. Cade studied her for a long moment, like he was trying to figure out if she was lying. Fine, he said. You want to work? You can work. But don't expect me to go easy on you. I don't expect anything from you. Good. Be ready at dawn tomorrow. He walked out, letting the door slam behind him. Ara stood alone in the kitchen, her hands throbbing, her whole body aching. She'd just bought herself 1 more day. Maybe 2, if she was lucky. It wasn't much. but it was something. That night, Otto lay in bed and listened to the sounds of the ranch. Horses moving in the corral, men's voices drifting from the bunkhouse, the wind rattling something loose on the roof. She thought about Philadelphia, about her father's house with its narrow stairs and peeling wallpaper, about Sienna in her room, probably reading by lamplight, safe and warm and completely unbothered by the fact that she'd sent her sister into exile. Otto had asked her once, the night before she left, "Why won't you go?" Sienna had looked up from her book, genuinely surprised by the question. "Because I don't want to." "And that's enough? You just don't want to?" "Yes." "What about the contract? What about father's debt?" "That's not my problem. It will be when the creditors come." Sienna had smiled then, the kind of smile that said she knew something Otto didn't. "Father will figure it out. He always does. By sending me instead. You volunteered. Because he was going to lose the house. And now he won't." Sienna had turned back to her book. "You should be thanking me, really. I could have made this much harder for you." Otto had left the room before she said something she'd regret. Now, lying in the dark 3,000 miles away, she wondered if Sienna ever thought about her, if she ever felt even a flicker of guilt. Probably not. Sienna didn't do guilt. Otto closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, she'd prove she could work. Tomorrow, she'd show Cade Mercer that she wasn't as useless as he thought. Tomorrow, she'd earn one more day. And the day after that, she'd do it again, for as long as it took. Because going back wasn't an option. And breaking wasn't either. Dawn came with a hand pounding on her door. "Up! Now!" Otto jerked awake, disoriented. For a second, she thought she was back in Philadelphia, that the past 3 days had been a fever dream. Then she saw the bare walls, felt the thin mattress beneath her, and remembered. She was out of bed before Cade's footsteps faded. Her hands screamed when she tried to button her dress. The blisters had scabbed over during the night, cracking open with every movement. She wrapped them as best she could with strips torn from a petticoat, then pulled on her mother's gloves over the makeshift bandages. When she stepped outside, the sky was still more black than blue. Cade stood by the barn with 2 of the ranch hands she'd seen yesterday. They all turned to look at her, and Otto felt the weight of their assessment. She'd changed into her oldest dress, a brown cotton thing she'd worn for housework back home, but it still looked too clean, too citified. "You're late," Cade said. "You didn't tell me what time." "Dawn means dawn, not after." Otto bit back a response. The sky was barely light. She'd been awake for less than 5 minutes. One of the ranch hands, a stocky man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, snorted. "She gonna work in that?" "Unless you brought her spare clothes, Garrett." "Yeah." Garrett spat into the dirt. "Give her 2 hours. She'll be crying to go back inside." "Nobody asked you," Cade said, but there wasn't much heat in it. He turned to Ara. "You eat?" "No." "Too bad. Breakfast was an hour ago." He gestured toward the barn. "Come on." Inside, Hatch was already working, mucking out stalls with methodical efficiency. He glanced up when they entered, his gaze moving from Cade to Ara and back again. "She's helping today," Cade said. "Helping with what?" "Whatever needs doing." Hatch raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He pointed to a shovel leaning against the wall. "Start there. Watch where you step." Ara picked up the shovel. It was heavier than she expected, the wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. "You know how to use that?" Garrett asked from the doorway. "I'll figure it out." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Garrett shook his head and walked away, still muttering. Cade lingered for a moment watching her, then followed him out. Hatch went back to his work without a word. Ara stepped into the nearest stall and looked at the mess covering the floor. Horse manure, soiled straw, mud, all of it trampled into a dense mat that smelled worse than anything she'd encountered in her life. She drove the shovel in and immediately hit resistance. The mat didn't want to move. She tried again, putting her weight into it, and the shovel skidded sideways, nearly taking her with it. "You're doing it wrong," Hatch said without looking up. "How should I do it?" "Angle the blade. Don't try to lift it all at once." Ada adjusted her grip and tried again. This time the shovel bit in, and she managed to scrape up a small pile. She carried it to the wheelbarrow Hatch had positioned outside the stall, dumped it, and went back for more. By the 10th load, her arms were shaking. By the 20th, she couldn't feel her hands anymore. By the 30th, she had to stop and lean against the stall door to catch her breath. Hatch was watching her now. His own work paused. "You can quit any time," he said. "I'm not quitting." "Nobody said you had to prove anything." "Yes, they did." Hatch considered that, then nodded. "Fair enough." Ada pushed off the door and went back to shoveling. The sun was fully up by the time she finished the first stall. Sweat ran down her back, soaking through her dress. Her shoulders burned. The bandages under her gloves were damp with something that was probably blood. She moved to the second stall and started again. Hatch worked beside her in silence, never offering to help, never commenting on her pace. When noon came, he finally spoke. "That's enough for now. I'm not done." "I know, but if you don't stop, you won't be able to move tomorrow." "I can handle it." "I'm sure you think so." Hatch took the shovel from her hands before she could protest. "Go eat something. You're no good to anyone if you pass out." Ara wanted to argue, but her legs were trembling. She nodded and walked toward the house, forcing herself not to stumble. Inside, the main room was empty. On the table, someone had left a plate covered with a cloth. Underneath, 2 more of those hard biscuits, a slice of bacon, and an apple. She ate standing up, too tired to sit. The food was cold, but she barely tasted it. When she finished, she went to the basin and tried to wash her hands. The water turned pink. She was wrapping fresh bandages when the door opened. Cade came in, saw her hands, and stopped. "How bad?" "It's fine." "That's not what I asked." "They'll heal." He crossed the room and took her wrist before she could pull away. His hands were rough, calloused, but surprisingly gentle as he turned her palm up to examine the damage. "You should have said something." "What would you have done?" "Given you different work." "I don't want different work." Cade looked up at her. This close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from one hard day, but the deeper kind that lived in your bones. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because you told me to." "I told you to be ready. I didn't tell you to work yourself to pieces." "What's the difference?" "The difference is..." He stopped, frustrated again. He seemed to spend a lot of time frustrated around her. "The difference is I need workers, not martyrs." "Then you're lucky. I'm not trying to be either." He let go of her wrist and stepped back. "Hatch says you did good work this morning." "He didn't say that." "He didn't have to. If you'd done bad work, he would have told me." Cade pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. It stuck up in odd directions, stiff with dust and sweat. "You can have the afternoon off." "I don't want it." "It's not optional." "Everything's optional." "Not on my ranch." He put his hat back on. "Rest. Clean up. Tomorrow's going to be worse." He left before she could respond. Ara stood in the kitchen, alone again, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not gratitude. She didn't owe him anything. But maybe something close to recognition. He'd noticed. That was more than she'd expected. She went back to her room and lay down on the bed, still wearing her filthy dress, and fell asleep in seconds. When she woke, it was dark outside and someone was shouting. Ara sat up, heart pounding. The shouting came from somewhere beyond the house, multiple voices overlapping. She went to the window but couldn't see anything. She pulled on her boots and went outside. The commotion was coming from the corral. Lanterns had been lit, casting wild shadows across the fence posts. A cluster of men stood at the far end, all focused on something she couldn't see. She walked closer. Inside the corral, a horse was trying to kill itself. That was the only way to describe it. The animal, a gray stallion, beautiful even in its fury, was throwing itself against the fence with enough force to shake the posts. Blood streaked its shoulder where the wood had torn skin. Its eyes were white-rimmed, rolling. "Get back!" someone yelled, but not at her. At the horse. Garrett was inside the corral, rope in hand, trying to get close enough to secure a line. The horse wheeled and charged him. Garrett dove sideways, barely clearing the fence. "This is insane," another hand said. "We should just shoot it." "Cade won't let you," Hatch said. He was standing apart from the others, watching with that same calm expression. That horse cost him 3 months' profit. "Then Cade's an idiot. Tell him yourself." As if summoned, Cade appeared from the barn, carrying a coil of rope. He vaulted the fence in one smooth motion and dropped into the corral. "Boss, don't..." Garrett started, but Cade ignored him. The stallion saw him and charged immediately. Cade didn't run. He stood his ground, rope loose in his hands, and at the last possible second stepped aside. The horse thundered past, close enough to touch. "You're going to get yourself killed," someone muttered. Cade circled slowly, keeping his movements small. The horse tracked him, sides heaving, nostrils flared. "Easy," Cade said. His voice was different now, lower, softer. "Easy now." The horse stamped and tossed its head. Cade took a step forward. The horse exploded backward, slamming into the fence again. Something cracked, wood or bone, impossible to tell. "That's enough." Garrett climbed back over the fence. "We're not doing this tonight." "Yes, we are." "Boss, I said we're doing this." Otto watched Cade approach the horse again, watched the animal retreat and charge and retreat again. It was a dance, brutal and chaotic, and neither side was winning. She didn't think about what she did next. There wasn't time to think. She climbed the fence. "Hey!" Hatch's voice cut through the noise. "Get down from there!" Otto dropped into the corral. The horse's attention snapped to her immediately. For a moment, everything went still. The men stopped yelling. Cade froze mid-step. Even the horse seemed to pause. Then it charged. Otto didn't move. She'd never been close to a horse before. She didn't know anything about them except what she'd watched Hatch do in the barn. But she knew fear when she saw it. The horse wasn't trying to kill anyone. It was terrified. "Don't," she said. Not loud, barely above a whisper. The horse skidded to a stop 5 feet away, hooves churning dirt. "Don't," Utta said again. She held out her hand, palm up, the way she'd seen Hatch do. "Nobody's going to hurt you." "Get out of there," Cade said behind her. His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the edge underneath. Utta ignored him. She took one small step forward. The horse backed up. She took another step. The horse stood its ground this time, ears pinned flat, but it didn't charge. "You're scared," Utta said. "I know, I'm scared too." She was close enough now to see the white foam at the corners of its mouth, the cuts on its legs from where it had kicked the fence. Close enough to die if it decided to strike. She kept her hand extended. "I won't hurt you," she said. "I promise." The horse's ears twitched forward, just a fraction. Utta waited. Behind her, the ranch hands had gone completely silent. Even Cade wasn't moving. The horse took one step toward her, then another. Its muzzle touched her palm, hot, velvet soft, trembling. Utta exhaled slowly. "That's it. See? You're okay." She raised her other hand and touched the horse's neck. Its skin was slick with sweat, muscles jumping under her fingers. She stroked gently, the way you'd comfort a frightened child. The horse didn't move. "You can do this now," Utta said quietly. She wasn't sure if she was talking to the horse or Cade. After a moment, she heard footsteps. Cade approached from the side, slow and careful. The horse's ears flicked back, but it didn't bolt. Cade slipped the rope over its neck. The horse shuddered, but held still. Utta kept stroking its neck, murmuring things that didn't mean anything, until Cade had the rope secured. Only then did she step back. The horse watched her go, eyes dark and liquid in the lamplight. Cade led it toward the barn, and this time it followed without fighting. The ranch hands were staring at Utta like she'd just performed a miracle. "What the hell was that?" Garrett said. Utta looked down at her hands. They were shaking again. "I don't know," she said honestly. Hatch made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Well, guess you're not completely useless after all." Utta's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, adrenaline draining out of her all at once. Someone, she didn't see who, brought her a cup of water. She drank it in one gulp and handed the cup back. By the time she looked up, most of the men had dispersed. Only Hatch remained, watching her with that unreadable expression. "You know you could have died just then," he said. "Yes." "And you did it anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Utta thought about the horse's fear and her own, and how sometimes they felt like the same thing. "Because nobody else was going to." Hatch nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense. Cade emerged from the barn a few minutes later. The horse was nowhere in sight, probably secured in one of the back stalls. He walked over to where Utta was still sitting and crouched down so they were eye level. "Don't ever do that again," he said. Okay. I mean it. That horse could have killed you. I know. Do you? Because it didn't look like you knew. Ada met his eyes. Would you have rather I let it keep hurting itself? I would have rather you stayed on the other side of the fence. Too late for that. Cade stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. You're insane. Probably. Definitely. He stood and offered her his hand. Come on, let's get you cleaned up before you bleed all over my corral. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her palms were raw again, the bandages completely shredded. I'll need new cloth, she said. I'll get some. He paused, still holding her hand. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Which one do you think it was? Haven't decided yet. He let go and walked toward the house. Ada followed, her whole body aching, her hands on fire. But something had changed. She could feel it in the way the ranch hands watched her pass, in the way Hatch nodded at her, in the way Cade held the door open and waited for her to go inside before following. She'd proven something tonight. She wasn't sure what exactly, but it was enough. The next week passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion and small victories. Cade put her to work in the kitchen first, cooking for the ranch hands. Ada had never cooked for more than her family before, certainly never for 8 hungry men who expected 3 full meals a day. The first morning, she burned the bacon and undercooked the eggs. Garrett made a point of leaving his plate untouched. The second morning, she got the bacon right, but the biscuits came out hard as stones. The third morning, everything was edible. By the end of the week, nobody was complaining. You're learning, Hatch said one afternoon, watching her knead dough. Faster than I expected. Did you expect me to learn at all? Honestly, no. He poured himself coffee from the pot she'd started keeping warm on the stove. Thought you'd last 3 days, maybe 4. What changed your mind? The horse. He took a sip, made a face. She still hadn't figured out how to make coffee that didn't taste like creek water, and took another sip anyway. That wasn't luck, that was something else. I don't know what it was. Neither do I. But Cade's been working with that stallion every day since, and it's responding. Won't let anyone else near it, though, just him. And you, if you wanted. Ada punched down the dough, flour dusting her forearms. I don't. Why not? Because it's not my horse. Could be, if you asked. I'm not asking for anything. Hatch set down his cup. You know, most people in your position would be asking for all kinds of things. Better room, easier work, a ticket back east. I'm not most people. No, Hatch agreed. You're really not. He left her to finish the bread, and Ada shaped the dough into loaves, her hands moving with a confidence she was starting to recognize. She was getting stronger. The blisters had toughened into calluses. Her arms didn't shake anymore when she lifted the washpot or carried water from the well. Her body was changing, adapting. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. That night, after the hands had eaten and the dishes were cleaned, Cade found her on the porch. We're moving cattle tomorrow, he said without preamble, shifting them to the north pasture before the weather turns. All right, I want you to come. Ada looked up at him, surprised. Why? Because you need to see what this place is, what it takes to run it. I've been working for a week straight. In the house, in the barn, that's not the ranch. He gestured toward the darkness beyond the porch, where the land stretched away into nothing. That is, and if you're going to stay, you need to understand it. You're not sending me back? The question hung between them. Cade's jaw tightened. I haven't decided. It's been a week. I know how long it's been. Then decide. It's not that simple. Why not? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled off his hat and turned it over in his hands, studying it like it held some answer he couldn't find. Your sister wrote me letters, he said finally. Told me about her life in Philadelphia, her friends, her family, what she liked to read. She made it sound... He stopped. It doesn't matter what she made it sound like. Point is, I thought I knew who I was getting. Thought I'd made an informed choice. And instead you got me. Yeah. He put his hat back on. Instead, I got you, and I don't know what to do with you. So figure it out. I'm trying. Try harder. Cade let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. You don't make anything easy, do you? Should I? Most people would. I keep hearing that. I'm not most people. No. He looked at her directly now, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. You're really not. He went inside, leaving Ada alone on the porch. She sat there until the stars came out, bright and cold and innumerable. Back in Philadelphia, you could barely see the stars through the coal smoke and city lights. Here, they filled the entire sky, so many it almost hurt to look at them. She thought about Sienna's letters, about the life her sister had invented for Cade, full of parties and books and things that never existed. She wondered what Sienna had said about their father, their house, the reason she needed to leave. Probably nothing true. Sienna was good at lying. She always had been. Ada had never been good at it. She'd never learned the trick of saying what people wanted to hear instead of what was real. Maybe that's why she was here and Sienna wasn't, because the truth, apparently, was worth less than a pretty fiction. She went inside and fell asleep thinking about horses and stars and men who couldn't decide what they wanted. The cattle drive started before dawn. Ara wore her oldest dress again, the brown one that was now permanently stained with barn dirt and food grease. Hatch had given her a wide-brimmed hat that was too big, and she'd stuffed cloth around the inside band to make it fit. 8 men were riding out, plus Cade. Ada rode on a gentle mare Hatch had saddled for her, a patient animal that seemed to understand its rider had no idea what she was doing. Just hold on, Hatch had said. She'll follow the others. So Ada held on. They rode for an hour before they reached the herd. Ada had never seen so many cattle in one place, hundreds of them, scattered across the pasture like dark boulders. They looked peaceful from a distance. Up close, they were massive and unpredictable and loud. Stay on the edges, Cade told her. Don't get in the middle unless someone tells you to. The next 3 hours were chaos. The men worked in organized patterns Ara couldn't follow, cutting cattle from the herd, driving them forward, circling back to pick up stragglers. Dust rose in choking clouds. The noise was constant, cattle lowing, men shouting, horses snorting. Ada stayed on the edges like she'd been told, watching, learning. Around noon, something went wrong. She didn't see what caused it, maybe a snake, maybe just panic, but suddenly a group of cattle broke away from the main herd, running blind in the wrong direction. Get them, Cade shouted. 2 hands peeled off in pursuit, but the cattle were fast, driven by fear. Ada saw one split off from the group, heading toward a gully. She kicked her mare forward without thinking. The horse responded immediately, surging into a gallop. Wind whipped Ada's face, tore at her hat. She gripped the saddle horn with both hands, every muscle locked. The steer was 20 yards ahead, crashing through brush. 15 yards. 10. Ada pulled alongside it, still holding on for dear life. She had no rope, no plan, no idea what she was doing. Turn, she yelled at it. Turn around! The steer ignored her. Ara did the only thing she could think of. She angled her horse directly into its path. The mare obeyed, cutting hard left. The steer tried to dodge, stumbled, and wheeled around, bellowing. It took off back toward the herd, and Ara's horse followed, herding it like it had done this 1,000 times before. When they reached the main group, Garrett was waiting, rope ready. He caught the steer and integrated it back into the herd with practiced ease. Then he looked at Ada. Where'd you learn that? I didn't. The horse did. Garrett stared at her for a moment, then shook his head. You're either crazy or... He stopped. Actually, no. You're just crazy. But he was almost smiling when he said it. Cade rode up a few minutes later, his face unreadable. I told you to stay on the edges. I did, until that steer ran. And then? And then I stopped it. You could have been thrown, broken your neck. But I wasn't. Cade opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he just shook his head. Next time, wait for someone who knows what they're doing. All right. I mean it. I said, all right. He rode off, but Ada caught something in his expression before he turned away. Not anger. Something closer to respect. They finished the drive by late afternoon. All the cattle settled in the north pasture. The men were exhausted, covered in dust, talking in tired voices about food and sleep. Ara felt like she'd been beaten with a stick. Every part of her hurt. Her legs, her back, her hands, especially her hands. The rains had rubbed the calluses raw again. But she'd done it. She'd kept up. On the ride back, Hatch pulled his horse alongside hers. You did good today. Thank you. Didn't think you would. I know. But you proved me wrong. He adjusted his hat against the lowering sun. You're tougher than you look. Is that a compliment? Out here? Yeah. That night, Ara cooked dinner in a haze of exhaustion. Stew made from yesterday's beef, biscuits that actually rose this time, canned beans heated through. Basic food, nothing fancy. The men ate like they were starving. When she brought Cade his plate, he looked up at her. Sit down, he said. I need to... Sit. Ara sat. Cade pushed a second plate toward her. She hadn't realized he'd served 2 portions. Eat. I can eat later. You can eat now. That's an order. Ara picked up the fork and took a bite. The stew was better than she expected. The meat tender, the vegetables soft. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until she started eating. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Around them, the ranch hands talked and laughed, their voices a low rumble. You did well today, Cade said finally. You already told me to wait next time. I did, and you should, but... He set down his fork. You didn't panic. That counts for something. What does it count for? I don't know yet. He stood, picking up both their empty plates. But I'm starting to figure it out. He went to wash the dishes before she could respond. Ara sat at the table, surrounded by tired men and empty plates and the smell of food and sweat and leather, and felt something she hadn't felt since leaving Philadelphia. Not happiness, not contentment, but maybe the beginning of belonging. Outside, the wind picked up. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, moving fast. Garrett noticed them too. Storm's coming. How bad? Someone asked. Bad enough. Garrett stood and stretched. Better secure everything tonight. We're in for it tomorrow. He was right. The storm hit just before midnight. Ara woke to the sound of thunder splitting the sky open. Rain hammered the roof like fists, so loud she could barely hear herself think. Wind screamed through gaps in the walls, making the whole house shudder. She got out of bed and her feet hit cold water. The floor was flooded. She grabbed her boots and splashed into the main room. Cade was already up, dressed, shoving furniture away from the windows. Water poured through a crack in the wall, spreading across the floorboards in dark fingers. Help me with this, he shouted over the noise. Together they dragged the table to the center of the room. Rain lashed through the window, soaking them both in seconds. Ada's nightdress clung to her skin, heavy and cold. The barn, she yelled. Hatch is there. We need to... The door slammed open. Garrett stood in the doorway, drenched, rain streaming off his hat. Cattle scattered, half the herd's running. How many men you got? 4, maybe 5 if Collins can ride. He twisted his ankle earlier. Cade swore. Get everyone mounted. I'll be there in 2 minutes. Garrett disappeared back into the storm. Cade turned to Ara. Stay inside. Don't go near the barn. Don't go outside. Just stay. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. You need every rider you have. You can barely ride in good weather. Then I'll learn fast. She was already moving toward her room. I'm not sitting here while the ranch falls apart. Ara... She ignored him, stripping off the wet nightdress and pulling on her work dress with shaking hands. The fabric stuck to her damp skin. She wrestled into her boots, grabbed her coat, and came back out before Cade could stop her. He stared at her for a second, jaw tight, then grabbed a rain slicker from the hook by the door and shoved it at her. You stay with me. You don't leave my sight. Understand? Yes. I mean it. This isn't the corral. You get lost out there. We won't find you until morning. I understand. They ran for the barn together, heads down against the wind. Inside, organized chaos. Hatch was saddling horses as fast as his hands could move, shouting instructions to the ranch hands scrambling to gear up. The mare Ara had ridden yesterday stood in her stall, ears pinned back, eyes rolling white. Can she handle the storm? Ara asked Hatch. Better than you can. He tossed her a saddle. But she'll do what you tell her, mostly. Ara hefted the saddle, heavier than she remembered, and managed to get it on the mare's back. Her hands fumbled with the straps, cold and clumsy. Cade appeared beside her and finished buckling the girth without a word. Mount up, he said. She did. They rode out into hell. The rain hit like thrown gravel, stinging any exposed skin. Lightning turned the world white for frozen seconds, then plunged it back into darkness. Ara could barely see Cade ahead of her, just a darker shadow against the black. The cattle were everywhere and nowhere. Ara caught glimpses of them, massive shapes charging through the rain, their panicked bellowing almost lost under the thunder. The herd had fragmented into dozens of smaller groups, all running in different directions. "Split up," Cade shouted. "Garrett, take the west side. Collins, you're with him. Hatch, north fence. Everyone else, push them toward the center pasture." "What about her?" someone yelled, pointing at Ara. "She's with me." They peeled off in different directions, swallowed by rain and dark. Cade kicked his horse forward and Ara followed, gripping the rein so hard her knuckles went white. Her mare kept pace, sure-footed even on ground turned to mud. A group of cattle emerged from the darkness, maybe 20 head, running blind. Cade moved to cut them off, and Ara mirrored him on the other side. The way she'd watched the hands do it yesterday. It almost worked. The cattle turned, started heading back the right direction, then something spooked them. Maybe more lightning, maybe just fear, and they scattered again. "Stay on them," Cade shouted. Cade onkot. Ara dug her heels in and the mare surged forward. Rain plastered her hair to her skull, ran into her eyes. She couldn't see, could barely breathe, but the horse seemed to know where to go. They chased the cattle for what felt like hours. Every time they got close to turning them, something went wrong. A steer would break away, or the group would fragment, or the terrain would force them to pull back. Ara's arms ached from fighting the reins. Her legs burned from gripping the saddle. She was soaked through, shivering, her teeth chattering so hard she bit her tongue and tasted blood. But she didn't stop. Somewhere in the chaos, Garrett's group rejoined them, adding another dozen cattle to the mix. Then Hatch appeared with more. Slowly, impossibly, they were gathering the herd back together. Ara had just started to think they might actually succeed when her horse stumbled. Not badly. Just a misstep in the mud. But it was enough to throw Ara off balance. She grabbed for the saddle horn, missed, and felt herself sliding sideways. She hit the ground hard, all the air slamming out of her lungs. For a second she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Rain pounded her face, mud soaked through her clothes. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Getting closer. She rolled onto her side and saw them coming. A dozen cattle, running straight at her, too panicked to see or care that she was in their path. Ara tried to stand and her ankle gave out. Sprained, maybe broken, she couldn't tell. The cattle were 30 yards away, 20. She heard someone screaming her name but couldn't tell who. The sound was distant, underwater, 15 yards. She covered her head with her arms, knowing it wouldn't help, doing it anyway. Then something hit her from the side, knocking her out of the path. She and whoever had grabbed her rolled through the mud, tangled together, as the cattle thundered past so close she felt the ground shake. When they stopped rolling, Cade was on top of her, one arm braced on either side of her head, blocking the rain. "Are you hurt?" Ara couldn't answer. Her whole body was shaking, not from cold, but from the realization of how close she'd just come to dying. "Ara, are you hurt?" "My ankle," she managed. Cade sat back and examined it with quick, efficient movements. Even through the boot, she could see it was already swelling. "Can you ride?" "I don't know. That's not an answer I can use." Lightning flashed. In the white light, she saw his face, mud-streaked, exhausted, angry. "I can ride," she said. He pulled her upright and half-carried her to where both their horses stood waiting. Somehow he got her back in the saddle. She didn't know how. Her whole body felt like it belonged to someone else. "Stay close," Cade said. "I'm not fishing you out of the mud again." They kept working. Ara's ankle screamed with every movement, but she gritted her teeth and ignored it. The cattle were mostly rounded up now, the scattered groups pushed back toward the main herd. The hands worked with grim efficiency, everyone too tired and wet to do anything but focus. By the time the first gray light touched the horizon, they had most of the herd contained in the center pasture. A few stragglers were still out there, but not enough to matter. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The wind had died. Everything looked gray and drowned. "Head count," Cade said to Garrett. Garrett nodded and rode off, gathering the other hands. Cade came back to Ara. "You're done. Get inside." "I can help with—" "That wasn't a suggestion." Hatch appeared and took her mare's reins. "Come on, I'll walk you back." Ara wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She let Hatch lead the horse toward the barn while she clung to the saddle, barely conscious. Inside, he helped her down and she immediately collapsed. Her ankle wouldn't hold any weight at all. That looks bad, Hatch said, examining it. It's fine. It's not fine. You need to stay off it for at least a week. I don't have a week. Then you'll make it worse. He pulled off her boot. She had to bite her sleeve to keep from screaming and wrap the ankle in strips of cloth. Keep it elevated. I'll bring ice from the cold storage. Hatch, don't argue. You did good work out there. Now let someone take care of you for once. He left before she could protest. Otta sat on a hay bale, ankle throbbing, clothes dripping muddy water onto the floor. Through the barn door, she could see the ranch hands gathering, counting cattle, assessing damage. They moved like ghosts through the gray morning. Cade was in the middle of them, still mounted, still directing. He hadn't slowed down at all. Ara watched him until exhaustion dragged her under. She woke in her own bed, no memory of how she got there. Afternoon light slanted through the window. Her ankle was properly wrapped now, elevated on a pile of folded blankets. Someone had changed her into a dry nightdress and piled quilts on top of her. The house was quiet. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body had locked up overnight. Moving hurt. Breathing hurt. The door opened and Cade came in carrying a tray. You're awake. How long? 12 hours. He set the tray on the chest of drawers. Soup, bread, water. You need to eat. The cattle? We lost 17 head. Could have been worse. He pulled up the room's only chair and sat heavily, like standing required too much effort. Could have been a lot worse. I'm sorry. For what? Falling off. Making you save me. Cade's expression didn't change. You fell off because your horse stumbled in a storm. That's not your fault. Still nothing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You stayed out there for 6 hours in the worst weather this ranch has seen in 2 years. You helped save the herd. That's what matters. Otta looked at him properly for the first time. He was clean now, changed into fresh clothes, but he looked worse than he had in the storm. Exhausted beyond exhausted. When did you sleep? She asked. I didn't. Cade, someone had to make sure the damage wasn't worse than we thought. Check the fences, count the herd again. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'll sleep tonight. You should sleep now. In a minute. He picked up the soup bowl and handed it to her. Eat first. She took it, and their fingers brushed. His hands were colder than hers. They sat in silence while she ate. The soup was simple, beef broth with vegetables, but it was hot and she was starving. She finished the whole bowl plus the bread. When she was done, Cade took the empty dishes and stood. Rest. You're not working for at least 3 days. I can still cook. Not on that ankle. I can sit while I... Ara. He said her name quietly, but there was steel underneath. You almost died last night. Let yourself heal. He left before she could argue. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her ankle throbbing in time with her pulse. 3 days. What was she supposed to do for 3 days? The answer came that evening when she heard voices in the main room. Multiple voices, all talking over each other. One of them was female. Otta sat up too fast, pain shooting through her ankle. She grabbed the bedpost to steady herself, ears straining. Told you the contract was for me, the woman was saying. Not her. Cade's voice, flat and tired. I don't care what you were told. But father said, I don't care what your father said either. Otta's stomach dropped. Sienna. She forced herself to stand, putting all her weight on her good foot, and hobbled to the door. She eased it open just enough to see into the main room. Sienna stood by the fireplace, looking exactly like Ara remembered. Beautiful. Perfect. Wearing a traveling dress that probably cost more than everything Ara owned. Her blonde hair was arranged in careful curls, not a strand out of place despite the journey. Next to her stood a man Ara didn't recognize. Older, well-dressed, carrying a leather satchel that screamed lawyer. Cade stood between them and the door like he was guarding it. This is my sister's doing, Sienna said, her voice hitching just slightly. Practiced emotion. She tricked you. Tricked our father. She knew I was supposed to come, and she stole my place. Nobody stole anything, Cade said. Then where is she? Why isn't she explaining herself? She's injured. She's resting. How convenient. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, my client has a legitimate grievance. The contract your representative negotiated with Mr. Vance clearly specified your client can take her grievance back to Philadelphia. I'm afraid it's not that simple. There are legal questions here. Questions of fraud, misrepresentation. There's no fraud. A woman showed up. I accepted her. Contracts fulfilled. But the wrong woman, Sienna said. Surely you can see that. Cade looked at her for a long moment. I see a woman who refused to honor an agreement, then changed her mind when it suited her. Sienna's perfect expression cracked, just for a second. Then she recovered, eyes filling with tears that somehow didn't fall. I was scared. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to, but now I'm ready. I want to make this right. By replacing your sister. By taking my rightful place. Your rightful place? Cade's voice went cold. You think you have a rightful place here, on this ranch, doing this work? I can learn. Your sister learned. In 2 weeks, she learned to cook for 8 men, muck stalls, herd cattle in a storm that nearly killed her. You think you can do that? Sienna's chin lifted. I'm stronger than I look. You're exactly as strong as you look. Cade turned to the lawyer. Is there a legal standing here, or are you just wasting my time? The lawyer pulled papers from his satchel. The original contract stipulates Sienna Vance, not Ara Vance. If Miss Sienna Vance wishes to honor that contract, she has every right. She gave up that right when she sent her sister in her place. That wasn't her decision. That was her father's. Then her father's the one who committed fraud, not Ara. The room went silent. Sienna's tears had dried up. She looked at Cade with something harder than sadness. You're choosing her. I'm honoring the choice that was made. Because she manipulated you. Because she's the one who showed up. She's the one who worked. She's the one who bled for this ranch. Cade's voice was rising now. You want to talk about rights? Fine. She earned hers. What have you earned? The contract. I don't care about the contract. He said it loud enough that even through the door, Ara flinched. You want to take this to court? Fine. Take it to court, but you're not taking her place. The lawyer and Sienna exchanged looks. Very well, the lawyer said. We'll see you before a judge. They left. Sienna sweeping out like she was exiting a stage, the lawyer hurrying after her. The door slammed. Cade stood alone in the middle of the room, shoulders tight, hands clenched into fists. Ara pushed the door open wider. You didn't have to do that. He spun around. How long have you been standing there? Long enough? Then you know what's coming. A legal fight, maybe a trial. Your sister's not going to let this go. I know. She'll drag your name through the mud, and mine, and the ranches. I know. Cade crossed the room in 3 strides. And you're okay with that? No. Ara leaned against the doorframe, taking the weight off her ankle. But I'm not running either. Why not? You could go back with her right now. Save everyone the trouble. Is that what you want? What I want... He stopped, jaw working. What I want doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Not in court, it doesn't. In court, what matters is what the contract says. And the contract says Sienna. Then let them take it to court. You'll lose. Maybe. Definitely. He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They have lawyers, money, the letter of the law. What do you have? Ara thought about it. About the past 2 weeks, the work, the pain, the slow building of something she didn't have a name for yet. I have this, she said. The ranch. The people who've watched me work. The truth. The truth doesn't win court cases. Then I'll lose. She held his gaze. But I won't walk away. Cade stared at her like he was trying to read something written in a language he didn't speak. Finally, he shook his head. You're going to get hurt. I'm already hurt. I mean worse than this. He gestured at her ankle. They're going to tear you apart. Say you manipulated me, used me. They'll make you sound like what I am? Ara smiled, bitter. The unwanted daughter who stole her sister's life? They won't have to work hard. It's all true. That's not... Cade stopped. Started again. You didn't steal anything. Didn't I? No. You took what was offered. That's different. Try telling that to a judge. They stood close enough that Ara could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated. "Why are you fighting for me?" she asked quietly. "I'm not fighting for you. I'm fighting for what's right." "Same thing." "It's not," he exhaled roughly. "You're making this complicated." "Everything's complicated." "Not this. This should be simple. Contract says Sienna. Sienna should be here." "But she's not." "But she's not," he agreed. "You are." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them wanted to examine too closely. Ara broke the silence first. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. They'll file their claim. We'll get a court date. Then we stand in front of a judge and hope he sees reason. And if he doesn't?" Cade's expression hardened. "Then we figure out what comes next." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said without looking back, "I'm glad it was you who showed up, not her." He left before Ara could respond. She stood in the doorway long after he'd gone, her ankles screaming, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Sienna was here. The fight was coming. And Ara had no idea if she was strong enough to survive it. The court summons arrived 3 days later. Ara was up and hobbling around by then, her ankles still weak but functional. She'd spent the past 72 hours cooking, the only work Cade would allow, and trying not to think about what was coming. The summons made it impossible to avoid. Cade read it out loud over breakfast, his voice neutral, while the ranch hands listened in silence. Court of the Territory of Wyoming. Plaintiff Sienna Vance versus Defendant Cade Mercer. Claim of contract fraud and misrepresentation. Hearing scheduled for... He stopped. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Garrett said. That's fast. Her lawyer probably paid for priority. Cade folded the paper and set it aside. Doesn't matter, we'll be ready. Ready how? Hatch asked. You got a lawyer? Working on it. Working on it isn't the same as having one. I know that. The men exchanged glances but said nothing. After breakfast, Otto found Cade in the barn, brushing down the gray stallion she'd calmed weeks ago. The horse stood perfectly still, eyes half closed, completely at ease. He trusts you now, she said. Took long enough. Cade didn't stop brushing. What do you need? To talk about the hearing. Nothing to talk about. Cade, I said there's nothing to talk about. He moved to the horse's other side. The lawyer will handle it. What lawyer? You just said you're working on finding one. And I am. In 2 weeks? If that's what it takes. Ada stepped into the stall, moving carefully on her weak ankle. Let me testify. No. Why not? Because they'll eat you alive. Sienna's lawyer is a professional. He'll twist everything you say until you sound like a criminal. Then help me prepare. I'm not putting you on that stand. It's not your choice. Cade stopped brushing and turned to face her. Yes, it is. You're there because of me, because of my contract. I'm not throwing you to the wolves, so some judge can decide if you're worthy. What if I want to face them? I don't care what you want. I care about winning. Then let me help you win. They stared at each other, both stubborn, both refusing to back down. Finally, Cade set down the brush. You really want to do this? Yes. Even though it might make things worse? Even though. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do it my way. You answer only what's asked. You don't volunteer information. You don't let them bait you into saying something stupid. I'm not stupid. I know, but they'll try to make you look stupid anyway. He picked up the brush again. We start preparing tomorrow. And Ara? Yeah? If you change your mind, it's okay. Nobody's forcing you to do this. I know. But she also knew she wouldn't change her mind. Sienna had come to take what she thought was hers, and Otto was going to show her exactly what she'd given up. The preparation was worse than the actual work on the ranch. Every evening after dinner, Cade would sit Otto down at the kitchen table and fire questions at her. Not gentle questions. The kind Sienna's lawyer would ask, designed to make her stumble. Why did you agree to take your sister's place? Because my father was in debt, and yes or no answers only. Yes, I agreed. Did you know the contract specified Sienna Vance by name? Yes. So you knowingly committed fraud. No, Yes or no? Otta's hands clenched under the table. No. But you just admitted you knew the contract was for your sister. The contract said Vance's daughter. I'm a Vance daughter. Cade shook his head. That's an argument, not an answer. The lawyer will twist that. Try again. They went through it over and over until Ara's head ached and her throat was raw from talking. Cade never let up, never gave her room to breathe. He pushed harder each time, finding new ways to phrase the same questions until she wanted to scream. On the fourth night, she did scream. Enough! I can't do this anymore. Cade leaned back in his chair. Then don't testify. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant... She pressed her palms against her eyes. I meant I need a break. 5 minutes. Something. You'll get breaks in court. When the judge calls them, not when you're tired of answering questions. I know that. Do you? Because right now you look like you're about to bolt. Otta dropped her hands. I'm not bolting. Good. Because Sienna's lawyer won't care if you're tired. He won't care if you're scared. He'll just keep coming until he gets what he wants. Which is, to make you look like a liar who manipulated your way into someone else's life. The words hit like a slap. Otta stood up, chair scraping against the floor. Maybe I am. What? Maybe he's right. Maybe I did manipulate this. Maybe... Stop. Cade stood too, facing her across the table. You didn't manipulate anything. You showed up. You worked. That's not manipulation. That's survival. Tell that to the judge. I will. But first you need to believe it yourself. He came around the table. Do you believe it? Otta looked at him, at the exhaustion in his face that matched her own, and felt something crack inside her chest. I don't know what I believe anymore. Then figure it out. Because in 10 days you're going to stand in front of a courtroom and they're going to ask you who you are, and you better have an answer. He left her standing there, alone in the kitchen, with questions she couldn't answer. The lawyer Cade finally found wasn't what Ara expected. His name was Samuel Worth, and he looked about 25 years old. He showed up at the ranch 6 days before the hearing, carrying a satchel that had seen better days and wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. You're the lawyer? Garrett asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. That's right. Worth didn't seem offended. Just passed the bar 3 months ago. 3 months, Hatch said. That's real reassuring. It's what we can afford, Cade said flatly. Unless you want to chip in for someone with more experience. Nobody volunteered. Worth set his satchel on the kitchen table and pulled out papers. All right, let's go over what we're dealing with. The plaintiff's claim is straightforward, fraud and misrepresentation. They're arguing that the contract specified Sienna Vance, you got Ara Vance, therefore the contract is void and Sienna should take her place. Can they do that? Otta asked. Legally? Maybe. Depends on the judge's interpretation. Worth shuffled through his notes. But we have a few things in our favor. First, the contract language is ambiguous. It says Vance's daughter in some places, Sienna Vance in others. We can argue that wasn't specific enough. That's weak, Cade said. It is, which is why our real argument is going to be acceptance and consummation. Consummation? Otta felt her face heat. Not that kind. Worth had the grace to look embarrassed. I mean, you've been living here, working here, functioning as Cade's wife in every practical sense. He accepted you in place of your sister. That acceptance matters. We're not actually married, Otta said. The room went quiet. Worth looked between Otta and Cade. You're not? The contract was an agreement for marriage, Cade said. You didn't formalize it. Worth sat down heavily. That's a problem. Why? Because without a legal marriage, you're just a woman living on his property. The contract's not fulfilled, which means Sienna's claim that she should take your place is actually stronger. Otta felt the floor drop out from under her. So I've been working for nothing. Not nothing, Cade said. You've been working for nothing, she repeated, because without a marriage, I don't actually have any claim here. I'm just... She laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm just the mistake everyone said I was. That's not true. Isn't it? She looked at Worth. Legally, what am I? Worth hesitated. Legally, you're a resident without standing, unless what? Unless you get married before the hearing. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Cade shook his head. No, It would solve the legal problem, Worth said. If you're married, her position is secure. The contract's fulfilled. Sienna has no claim. I said no. Why not? Ada asked. Cade turned to her, something dangerous in his expression. Because that's not why people get married. You were going to marry Sienna for a contract. That was different. How? Because He stopped, jaw tight. It just was. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. They stared at each other while Worth gathered his papers, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I'll work on the other arguments, Worth said quietly. See if we can build a case without the marriage angle. He left, and Ara and Cade stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, the table between them like a wall. You should get married, Hatch said from the doorway. They both jumped. Neither had heard him come in. How long have you been standing there? Cade asked. Long enough. Hatch limped into the room. And I'm saying you should do it. Not for the contract, not for the court case. Because it's the right thing. The right thing, Cade repeated. You think forcing her into a marriage she doesn't want is the right thing? Who said I don't want it? Ada said. Both men looked at her. I'm not saying I want it, she clarified. I'm saying nobody asked. You're all deciding what I want without actually asking me. Fine. Cade crossed his arms. Do you want to get married? Do you? That's not an answer. Neither is yours. Hatch made a disgusted sound. You're both idiots. You know that, right? Thanks, Hatch, Cade said. Real helpful. I'm serious. He pointed at Cade. You've been defending her for weeks, fighting for her, looking at her like... He stopped. Never mind. And you... He turned to Ada. You've been working yourself to the bone trying to prove you belong here, trying to prove you're worth keeping. You think that's about a contract? I don't know what it's about, Ada said quietly. Then you're blinder than I thought. Hatch shook his head. I'm going to bed. You two figure out what you actually want instead of arguing about what you think you should want. He left. Ada and Cade stood in the kitchen, not looking at each other. He's right, Ada said finally. About one thing at least. We should figure out what we want. And what do you want? She thought about it, really thought about it, maybe for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. I want to stay, she said. Not because of the contract, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because... She struggled for the words. Because this is the first place I've ever felt like I might actually belong. Cade's expression softened, just slightly. You do belong here. Do I? Or am I just convenient, the substitute who happened to work out? You're not a substitute. Then what am I? He didn't answer, couldn't maybe. The silence stretched between them, full of things neither knew how to say. Finally, Cade spoke. Get some sleep. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. But tomorrow came with its own problems. Ada was feeding the chickens when she saw the rider approaching. Even from a distance, she recognized the expensive horse, the careful posture. Sienna. She came alone this time. No lawyer, no entourage. She dismounted in front of the house with practiced grace and stood there, waiting. Ada set down the feed bucket and walked over, limping slightly. Her ankle was better, but still weak. Hello, Ada. Sienna. They looked at each other, these two sisters who shared blood and nothing else. Sienna spoke first. Can we talk? We're talking now. I mean privately. Anything you say to me, you can say in front of the ranch. Fine. Sienna glanced around, taking in the buildings, the corrals, the rough functionality of everything. This is what you left me for? This? I didn't leave you for anything. You sent me here. Father sent you. I would have come if what? If you weren't comfortable in Philadelphia? If you weren't enjoying your books and your social calls while I was mucking stalls and cooking for strangers? Sienna's perfect composure cracked. You don't know what my life is like. You're right, I don't. Because you never told me. You never tell me anything except what you think I should do. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Sienna. But here we are anyway. Sienna's hands twisted in her skirt, a nervous gesture Otto remembered from childhood. I didn't come here to fight. Then why did you come? To offer you a deal. Otto waited. Drop your claim, Sienna said. Admit you took my place by mistake. I'll pay your travel back to Philadelphia, give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere else. Somewhere you actually want to be. You can't possibly want this. Sienna gestured at the ranch, disgust barely hidden. This dirt and animals and manual labor, this isn't you. How would you know what's me? You've never paid attention long enough to find out. I know you're not a rancher's wife. Maybe I am now. Sienna laughed, sharp and dismissive. You're not even married. Worth told us. You've been living here like some kind of servant. Is that really what you want? To cook and clean for a man who doesn't even want you enough to… Stop. Ara's voice came out harder than she intended. Just stop. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to get what you want, same as always. What I want is what's mine. Sienna's mask dropped completely now, showing the anger underneath. That contract was for me. Father negotiated it for me, and you stole it. Father gave it to me because you refused it. Because I was scared. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to, but I'm ready now. I want to make this right. By taking my place. It was never your place to begin with. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. Ara felt them land, felt the old familiar shame trying to surface. But something else surfaced instead. Something harder. You're right, Ara said. It wasn't my place. It was yours. But you didn't want it. And now that I've done the work, now that I've built something here, you've decided you want it back. She stepped closer. Well, you can't have it. Not because of the contract, not because of some legal argument, but because I earned this. I bled for it, and you did nothing. Sienna's face went pale, then red. You always were jealous of me. Maybe I was, when we were children, when you got everything and I got nothing. Ara felt something settling inside her, something like certainty. But I'm not jealous anymore, because I have something you'll never have. What? The knowledge that I can survive anything, even you. Sienna stared at her for a long moment, then turned and mounted her horse without another word. She rode away without looking back, and Ara watched her go, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. When she turned around, Cade was standing on the porch. How much did you hear? She asked. Enough. He came down the steps. You handled that well. Did I? I basically told my sister to go to hell. She was trying to bribe you into leaving. You had every right. Ara rubbed her face with both hands. This is such a mess. Yeah. The hearing's in 4 days. I know. And we still don't have a real strategy. Worth is working on it. Worth is 25 years old and scared of his own shadow. Kate almost smiled. True, but he's what we've got. They stood in the yard, the sun warm on their shoulders, the ranch quiet around them. Cade? Yeah. If we lose, if the judge rules in Sienna's favor, what happens? He was quiet for a moment. Then I honor the contract the way it was written. Marry Sienna, and you go back to Philadelphia, if that's what you want. And if it's not, then we figure something else out. He looked at her. But we're not losing. You don't know that. No, but I know you're not giving up without a fight, and neither am I. The hearing day arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Ada dressed in the best thing she owned, a dark blue dress she'd brought from Philadelphia and never worn. It fit differently now, tighter in the shoulders, looser in the waist. Her body had changed, reshaped by the work. Cade wore a suit that looked like it hadn't been out of storage in years. He tugged at the collar, uncomfortable. I hate these things, he muttered. You look fine. I look like I'm going to a funeral. Maybe you are. He shot her a look. That's not funny. Wasn't trying to be funny. They rode to town in the wagon, Worth sitting in the back with his papers, going over his notes one final time. None of them spoke much. What was there to say? The courthouse was bigger than Ara expected, a 2-story building that dominated the small town's main street. People gathered outside, curious about the proceedings. News traveled fast in territory towns. Sienna was already there with her lawyer, both of them looking polished and confident. Sienna wore lavender silk, her hair perfect, her face arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. She looked like everything a rancher's wife should be. Ara looked down at her own dress, her work-roughened hands, her practical boots, and felt doubt creep in. "Stop," Cade said quietly. "Stop what?" "Comparing yourself to her. You're not her. That's the whole point." They went inside. The courtroom was simple. Wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front, the territorial seal on the wall behind it. About 30 people filled the gallery, ranchers and townspeople who'd come to watch. Judge Harrison entered, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes and a face that gave nothing away. Everyone stood until he sat. "Be seated. We'll keep this brief." He shuffled papers. "I've reviewed the filings. Miss Sienna Vance, you're claiming fraud and seeking to enforce the original contract terms. Mr. Mercer, you're arguing the contract was fulfilled as written. That about sum it up?" Both lawyers confirmed. "All right. Plaintiff, call your first witness." Sienna's lawyer stood. "We call Sienna Vance to the stand." Sienna rose gracefully and took the oath. Her voice was soft but clear, perfectly calibrated to sound honest and vulnerable. "Miss Vance, can you explain your relationship to the contract in question?" "Of course. My father arranged a marriage contract between myself and Mr. Mercer. We exchanged letters for 6 months. I believed we had an understanding. And what happened to prevent you from fulfilling that contract?" "I became ill." Sienna's eyes glistened. "A fever. The doctor said I couldn't travel. My father panicked about the deadline in the contract, so he sent my sister instead, without telling me, without asking my permission." "Did you ever refuse to honor the contract?" "Never. I was simply unable to travel at that time." Ara's hands clenched in her lap. It was a lie. Sienna had been perfectly healthy. She'd refused because she didn't want to leave Philadelphia. Worth scribbled notes but didn't object. "And when you recovered," the lawyer continued, "what did you do?" "I came here immediately, to make things right, to honor my commitment." Sienna looked at Cade. "But I found my sister had taken my place, stolen my life." "Objection," Worth said, standing. "Characterization." "Sustained. The witness will stick to facts." Sienna nodded, chastened. "I found my sister living here, and Mr. Mercer refused to acknowledge his contract with me." "Thank you. No further questions." Worth stood for cross-examination. He looked nervous, but his voice was steady. "Miss Vance, you said you became ill. Do you have documentation? Doctor's notes?" No, it was handled privately." "Privately, meaning there's no record of this illness that prevented you from traveling." "My father can confirm it. Your father isn't here, and you're asking this court to take your word that you were too sick to travel, yet healthy enough to write letters during this same period?" Sienna's composure slipped. "I could write, I couldn't travel." "For how long?" Several weeks." "Several weeks. And in those several weeks, you never once wrote to Mr. Mercer explaining the delay?" "I thought my father was handling it." "Your father who sent your sister without telling you?" Worth let that hang. No further questions. Sienna returned to her seat, spots of color high on her cheeks. The lawyer called another witness, a doctor from Philadelphia, who testified via written statement that Sienna had consulted him about travel concerns. It was vague enough to be useless, but it planted doubt. Then it was their turn. "We call Ara Vance to the stand." Ara stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness box. She took the oath, hand on the Bible, and sat down. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Worth approached. "Miss Vance, how did you come to be at the Mercer Ranch?" "My father told me about the contract, told me Sienna wouldn't fulfill it, asked me to go in her place." "Did you agree willingly?" "Yes." "Why?" Ara took a breath. "Because my father owed money. Debt collectors were threatening to take our house. The contract payment cleared that debt. So you sacrificed yourself to save your family." Objection, leading, sustained. Worth rephrased. "Did you understand what you were agreeing to?" "Yes, marriage to a man I'd never met. A life in a place I'd never seen. Work I'd never done." Ara looked at the judge. "I understood all of it." "And when you arrived, did Mr. Mercer accept you?" "Not at first. He saw me as a mistake, but he let me stay." "And what did you do?" "I worked, cleaned, cooked, learned to handle livestock, helped save the herd during a storm." She held up her hands, showing the calluses. "I earned my place." Thank you. Your witness. Sienna's lawyer stood, circling like a predator. Miss Vance, you say you understood what you were agreeing to. Did that include deceiving Mr. Mercer? I didn't deceive anyone. You showed up in place of your sister. That's not deception? The contract said Vance daughter. I'm a Vance daughter. The contract negotiation specifically discussed Sienna Vance. You knew that, didn't you? Yes. So you knowingly took something that wasn't meant for you. I took what was offered. By a desperate father trying to avoid debt. Not by Mr. Mercer, who had negotiated in good faith for someone else entirely. Ara's throat tightened. He accepted me. After you'd already arrived, after you'd already forced his hand. The lawyer leaned in. Tell me, Miss Vance, did you work so hard because you wanted to, or because you knew it was the only way to make him keep you? The question hit like a physical blow. Ara opened her mouth, closed it. Answer the question, please. I worked because the ranch needed it. That's not what I asked. It's the truth. Is it? Or is the truth that you manipulated your way into a life you had no right to, and now you're desperate to keep it? Objection. Worth was on his feet, badgering. I'll allow it. The witness will answer. Ara looked at Cade. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. She turned back to the lawyer. I'm not desperate. I'm fighting for what I earned. What you stole, you mean? What I built. Her voice came out stronger now. My sister had 6 months to come here, 6 months to honor her commitment. She didn't, I did. I'm the one who worked. I'm the one who bled. I'm the one who nearly died in that storm. She stood up, ignoring the judge's warning look. You want to talk about what I deserve? I deserve what I fought for. What Sienna deserves is whatever life she can build for herself. But it won't be this one. This one is mine. The courtroom was dead silent. The lawyer stared at her, then shook his head. No further questions. Ada sat down, heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Worth called Hatch next, then Garrett, then 2 other ranch hands. All of them testified to the same thing. Ara's work, her dedication, the transformation she'd undergone. She's more ranch than most men I've known, Hatch said. And I've known a lot of men. Finally, Worth called Cade. Cade took the stand, still uncomfortable in his suit, and answered Worth's questions about the contract, the arrival, the acceptance. When Miss Ara Vance arrived instead of her sister, what did you think? That it was wrong, that I'd been cheated. And now? Cade was quiet for a moment. Now I think I got exactly what I needed, just not what I expected. Can you explain that? I thought I wanted someone who could write pretty letters, someone who fit an idea I had in my head. Cade looked at Ara. But what I needed was someone who could survive out here, someone strong enough to handle the work, someone who wouldn't break. He paused. Ara is all of those things. Her sister isn't. So you're satisfied with the contract as fulfilled? Yes. Even though it wasn't Sienna who came, especially because it wasn't Sienna. Sienna's lawyer stood for cross. Mr. Mercer, you're not actually married to Miss Ara Vance, are you? Cade's jaw tightened. No. So the contract isn't truly fulfilled. The marriage was pending. She's been living as my wife in all but name. All but name. That's a significant distinction, isn't it? Not to me. But legally it matters. Without a marriage, Miss Ara Vance is just a worker on your property. No different than any ranch hand. She's different. How? Cade looked directly at Sienna, then at Ara. Because I choose her. Not because a contract says I should, because I want to. The words hung in the air. The lawyer tried a few more questions, but the damage was done. Or the victory was won, depending on your perspective. The judge called for closing arguments. Both lawyers made their cases. Fraud versus acceptance. Letter of law versus spirit of agreement. Then the judge leaned back in his chair. I've heard enough. Here's what I think. This case hinges on interpretation. The contract language is ambiguous enough that both sides have valid points. He looked at Sienna. You have a legitimate claim based on the original negotiations. But, he turned to Ara, you also have a legitimate claim based on acceptance and performance. Mr. Mercer accepted you in place of your sister. You fulfilled the contract terms by being present and willing. That counts for something. Ara held her breath. However, the judge continued, there's the matter of the marriage itself. Without a formal marriage, the contract isn't complete, which means we'll get married. Everyone turned. Cade was standing. Right now. Today. If that's what it takes to settle this. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Mercer, I'm serious. You can perform the ceremony right here. Make it legal. Then there's no question. Otta's heart stopped. The judge looked at her. Miss Vance? This would require your consent. Everyone waited. Otta looked at Cade, at the determination in his face, the absolute certainty. Then she looked at Sienna, at the fury and disbelief. She thought about Philadelphia, about her father's house, about being the spare, the backup, the one nobody wanted. She thought about the ranch, about calloused hands and storm-soaked nights, and the slow building of something real. She stood up. Yes, she said, I consent. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! He waited until the noise died down. Very well. I'll perform the ceremony. But make no mistake, this better not be a stunt to circumvent my ruling. It's not, Cade said. It's not, Otta echoed. The judge nodded. Then let's make it official. They stood before the bench, Otta in her work-worn blue dress, Cade in his uncomfortable suit. Worth served as witness. The judge read the words quickly, legally binding but stripped of ceremony. Do you, Cade Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Aura Vance, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Aura looked at Cade, really looked at him. Saw the man who'd let her stay when he could have sent her away, who'd taught her to survive, who'd fought for her even when it would have been easier not to. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. The judge signed the license. Now, as for the case, given that the contract is now fulfilled via legal marriage, I find no fraud occurred. Miss Sienna Vance, your claim is denied. The contract stands as executed. Sienna stood, shaking. This is absurd. They're making a mockery. My ruling stands, you're dismissed. Sienna looked at Otta one last time. Whatever she saw there made her turn away. She left with her lawyer, head high, defeat written in every line of her body. Otta stood in the courtroom, married, victorious, and utterly numb. We should go, Cade said quietly. They walked out into the afternoon sun, legally bound, practically strangers, and completely unsure what came next. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Otta sat beside Cade on the wagon bench, acutely aware of the marriage license folded in his coat pocket. Worth had stayed in town to file the paperwork. The ranch hands had ridden ahead, giving them space neither had asked for. You didn't have to do that, Otta said finally. Do what? Marry me. In front of everyone. You could have just argued the case. Cade kept his eyes on the road. Would have lost. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. The judge was looking for a reason to rule against us. The marriage gave him a reason to rule for us instead. So it was strategic. It was necessary. Otta felt something tighten in her chest. Right. Necessary. They didn't speak again until the ranch came into view. That night, Otta lay in her small room, still her room, nothing had changed, and stared at the ceiling. In the main room, she could hear Cade moving around, the familiar sounds of him banking the fire, checking the locks. They were married now, legally bound, and absolutely nothing was different. She should feel relieved, victorious even. She'd won. Sienna was gone. The ranch was secure. Instead, she felt hollow. The knock on her door came just as she was drifting off. You awake? Yeah. Cade opened the door partway. Can I come in? It's your house. That's not what I asked. Otta sat up. Come in. He entered, still wearing his work clothes. He'd changed the moment they got back, like he couldn't stand the suit another second. He stood awkwardly by the door, not quite looking at her. I need to say something. All right. What I did today, getting married in the courthouse, that wasn't fair to you. You saved the ranch. I put you in an impossible position. He finally met her eyes. You should have had a choice. A real one. Not a decision made in front of a judge with your sister watching. I did have a choice. I said yes. Because you had to. No. Otta pulled the quilt around her shoulders. Because I wanted to. Cade stared at her. What? I wanted to. Maybe not the way it happened, but she struggled for the words. I wanted to stay. Wanted this life, and if marrying you was what that took, then fine. That's not a reason to get married, isn't it? You were going to marry Sienna for a contract. At least I married you for something real. The ranch. The life. She corrected him. The work. The people. All of it. That's real. Cade sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to keep distance between them. What about the marriage itself? What about it? Does it mean anything to you, or is it just paper? Ada thought about that, about the past weeks, the slow building of something she couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe. Trust. Something more complicated than either. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Ask me in a year. A year. Yeah. See if we can stand each other that long. He almost smiled. Fair enough? They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a coyote called in the distance. You can have the main bedroom, Cade said. I'll take this one. Why? Because you're my wife now. You should have... I'm your wife on paper. Everything else stays the same until we figure out what this is. And if we never figure it out, then at least we'll have a working ranch. She met his eyes. That's more than most marriages have. Cade stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we've got fence repairs on the north pasture. We? You help save that herd. You get to help maintain the fence that keeps them in. He paused at the door. Welcome to married life on a ranch. He left, and Ada lay back down, something almost like a smile on her face. Maybe it wasn't the marriage she'd imagined back in Philadelphia when she was young enough to believe in romance and destiny. But it was real, and real, she was learning, was better than perfect. The weeks after the trial settled into a new rhythm. On the surface, nothing changed. Ada still cooked, still worked the ranch, still slept in the small back room. Cade still gave orders, still kept his distance, still treated her like a working partner rather than a wife. But underneath, something was shifting. She noticed it in small ways. The way he started asking her opinion on ranch decisions instead of just telling her what to do. The way he made sure she had the better horse when they rode out. The way he fixed the door to her room so it didn't stick anymore. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching. Ada noticed because she was looking too. One afternoon, 3 weeks after the trial, a letter arrived. Hatch brought it in from town, handed it to Ada without comment. The return address was Philadelphia, her father's handwriting. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. The letter was short. Her father's words were careful, controlled, revealing nothing. Ada, I heard about the trial, about the marriage. I trust you understand the position you put this family in. Sienna returned devastated. The social damage has been considerable. I expect you to conduct yourself with discretion going forward. Do not embarrass this family further. Father. No congratulations. No acknowledgement of what she'd survived. Just disappointment that she'd caused inconvenience. Ada read it twice, then walked to the fireplace and dropped it into the flames. Bad news? Cade asked from the doorway. Just my father reminding me I'm an embarrassment. You're not. To him I am. Always have been. She watched the paper curl and blacken. Sienna was the good daughter, pretty, accomplished, marriageable. I was just there. Their loss. Is it? Ada turned to face him. Sometimes I think he was right, that I don't fit anywhere. Not in Philadelphia, not here, not... Stop! Cade crossed the room. You fit here. You proved that. Did I? Or did I just work hard enough that you couldn't send me away? You really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. When I was 17, my father told me I'd never make anything of this ranch. Said the land was too hard, the weather too brutal, that I should sell it and move to a city where I could do real work. He looked out the window at the land stretching away. I stayed anyway. Spent the next 15 years proving him wrong, building something that worked despite everything against it. Did he ever admit he was wrong? He died before he got the chance. Cade turned back to her. But it didn't matter. I didn't build this place for his approval. I built it because it was mine. Because I chose it. Ada understood what he was saying. You think I should stop caring what my father thinks. I think you should care what you think, and I think you already know you belong here. You're just scared to believe it. Maybe I am. Then be scared, but don't let it make you doubt what you've earned. He left her standing by the fireplace, the last of her father's letter turning to ash. That night, Ada made a decision. She found Cade in the barn working on a saddle repair by lamplight. "Teach me to break horses." He looked up. "What?" "That stallion you bought, the gray one. He trusts you now, but you said you want to train him for ranch work. Teach me to help." "That's dangerous work. So is everything else on this ranch. Why do you want to learn?" Ara thought about how to explain it, about the feeling she'd had when she'd calmed that horse in the corral, the sense of connection to something wild and powerful. "Because I'm tired of just surviving," she said. "I want to be good at something. Really good, not just adequate." Cade studied her for a long moment. Then he set down the saddle. "All right, we start tomorrow. But you do exactly what I say, when I say it, no improvising." "Deal." The training was harder than anything Ara had done before. Breaking a horse, or gentling one, as Cade called it, required patience, timing, and an ability to read the animal's moods that Ara didn't naturally possess. She got thrown twice in the first week, kicked once, and nearly trampled when she moved too fast and spooked a mare. But she kept at it. Cade was a strict teacher, demanding and unforgiving of mistakes. But he was also fair. When she did something right, he acknowledged it. When she was wrong, he explained why without making her feel stupid. "You're getting better," he said one afternoon, watching her work a young gelding through its paces. "Faster than I expected." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." "I'll take it." She finished with the gelding and climbed out of the corral, sweaty and exhausted. Cade handed her a canteen and she drank deeply. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "The marriage. Letting me stay. All of it." Cade was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I regret how it happened. The courtroom, the pressure, all of that. But I don't regret the outcome." "Even though you didn't get Sienna?" "Especially because I didn't get Sienna." He took the canteen back. I thought I wanted someone cultured, educated. Someone who could write pretty letters and make the ranch look respectable to outsiders." He met her eyes. "But what I needed was someone who could actually run it with me. Someone strong enough to handle the reality instead of the idea." "And you think that's me?" "I know it is." Something warm unfurled in Ara's chest. Not love, she wasn't ready to call it that yet, but something close, something possible. "For what it's worth," she said, "I don't regret it either. Any of it. Not even falling off your horse in the storm? That was character building. That was stupid." "Same thing," Cade laughed, the sound surprising both of them. Ara couldn't remember the last time she'd heard him laugh. "Come on," he said. "Let's get cleaned up. It's your turn to cook and I'm starving." They walked back to the house together, and for the first time since arriving, Ara felt like she wasn't walking alone. The letter came in late autumn, when the leaves were turning and the air had started to bite. It was from a doctor in Philadelphia. Her father was dying. Ara read it twice, standing in the kitchen, feeling nothing and everything at once. "Bad news?" Hatch asked. He'd brought the mail in again, seemed to be making a habit of it. "My father's dying, consumption. The doctor says it's weeks, maybe days." "You going back?" "I don't know." Cade came in from the barn, took one look at her face, and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" She handed him the letter. He read it quickly, handed it back. "When are you leaving?" "I haven't decided if I am." "Ara, he's been dying to me for months, since before I left Philadelphia. What difference does it make if I'm there when it actually happens? He's your father. He's the man who traded me for debt relief, who never saw me as anything but a problem to solve." She folded the letter carefully. Why should I give him my grief when he never gave me anything but disappointment? Cade pulled out a chair and sat down. "Because if you don't go, you'll regret it. Not now, maybe not for years, but eventually." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do. I didn't make it back before my father died. Told myself it didn't matter, that we'd said everything that needed saying. But I was wrong. There were things I needed to say, even if he couldn't hear them, even if it wouldn't change anything." He looked at her. "Go. Say what you need to say. Then come back." "Come back," Ada repeated. "You mean that? This is your home now. No matter what happens in Philadelphia, you have a place here. The words broke something open inside her. Ada sat down across from him, her hands shaking. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of going back, of seeing Sienna, of standing in that house and remembering who I used to be. She met his eyes. What if I can't come back? What if I go there and realize I don't belong here after all? You belong here. You know you do. Do I? Or have I just convinced myself because I didn't have anywhere else to go? Cade reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her deliberately since the courthouse, and the contact sent electricity through her. You belong here, he said again, because you chose it, because you built it, because when everything tried to break you, you refused to break. His grip tightened. That doesn't go away just because you go back to Philadelphia for a week. Ada looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, hers calloused and strong. Come with me, she said suddenly. What? Come with me. To Philadelphia. I don't want to face this alone. Ara, please. I know it's asking a lot, but I need... She stopped, unsure how to finish. You need what? I need someone who sees me the way I am now, not the way I was. She squeezed his hand. I need you. Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, we'll go together. They left 2 days later, taking the train east. Ada hadn't been on a train since she'd left Philadelphia months ago. It felt strange being surrounded by people again, by noise and crowds, and the particular kind of chaos that came with civilization. Cade looked uncomfortable in his traveling suit, kept tugging at the collar. You can take it off once we're seated, Ada said. Thank God. They found their compartment and settled in. Through the window, Ada watched Wyoming slip past. The plains, the mountains, the endless sky. You all right? Cade asked. Just thinking. About? About how different everything looks from this direction. When I came out, I was so scared, so sure I'd made a terrible mistake. She turned to him. But I wasn't wrong. I was exactly where I needed to be. I just didn't know it yet. And now? Now I know it. She smiled. Took me long enough. The train carried them east through changing landscapes. Wyoming gave way to Nebraska, Nebraska to Iowa, the plains slowly transforming into farms and small towns and finally cities. Philadelphia looked smaller than Ara remembered. The streets that had once seemed so grand now felt cramped and dirty. The buildings pressed too close together. Even the air smelled wrong, coal smoke and waste instead of grass and livestock. This is where you grew up? Cade asked, staring out the carriage window. This is it. It's disappointing. Different. Not better or worse. Just different. They arrived at her father's house in the late afternoon. It looked exactly the same, narrow, cramped, paint peeling on the shutters. Ada stood on the sidewalk, staring up at it, and felt like she was looking at a stranger's home. Ready? Cade asked. No, but let's do it anyway. The housekeeper answered the door, Mrs. Chen, who'd worked for the family since Ara was a child. She looked older, tired. Miss Ara, we weren't expecting... She saw Cade and stopped. You're married? I am. This is my husband, Cade. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. Good. You deserve someone good. She stepped aside. Your father's upstairs. The doctor's with him. Your sister's in the parlor. Of course she was. Ara found Sienna sitting by the window, dressed in black already, embroidery in her lap that she wasn't working on. She looked up when Ada entered, and for a moment neither spoke. You came, Sienna said finally. I did. I'm surprised, after everything. He's still my father. Is he? You seemed pretty happy to leave him behind. Sienna set down the embroidery. To leave all of us behind. Ada sat down across from her. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Ada. You chose the ranch. You chose that life. You chose him. She glanced toward the door where Cade was talking to Mrs. Chen. Was it worth it? Yes. The simple certainty of it seemed to surprise Sienna. Why? Because I found something there I never had here. Purpose. Work that mattered. People who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Ada leaned forward. You could have had that too, but you chose comfort instead. I chose civilization. You chose safety, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't resent me for choosing differently. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. I do resent you. I resent that you took something that was mine and made it yours. That you succeeded where I would have failed. That you... Her voice broke. That you're happy and I'm still here, trapped in this house, taking care of a dying man who never cared about either of us. The honesty was unexpected. Ada sat back, processing it. He cared, she said quietly, in his way. It just wasn't the way we needed. That's not good enough. No, but it's what we got. Upstairs, a door opened. The doctor came down, his face grave. He's asking for you, he said to Ada. Both daughters. You should go now. Ada and Sienna climbed the stairs together, the way they had as children, but everything about it felt different now. Their father lay in bed, shrunken and gray. Ada barely recognized him. The man who'd loomed so large in her childhood had become small, consumed by illness. He opened his eyes when they entered. It took him a moment to focus. Ada, you came. I did. Sienna said you wouldn't, said you hated me too much. I don't hate you. Ada pulled up a chair beside the bed. I don't think I ever did. Her father's breath rattled in his chest. I wasn't a good father to you. No, I favored Sienna. I know I did. She was easier, prettier, more like your mother. He coughed, a wet, painful sound. But you were stronger. I see that now. Too late, but I see it. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm dying, and I want you to know. He struggled for the words. I want you to know I'm proud of you, for surviving, for building a life, for not becoming bitter. Ara felt tears burning in her eyes. She'd waited her whole life to hear those words, and now that she had them, they felt hollow. I don't need your pride, Father. I needed it 20 years ago. I needed it when I was a child trying to understand why I wasn't enough. She wiped her eyes angrily. But I don't need it anymore. I built my own life. I found my own worth. And I did it without you. Her father closed his eyes. I know. And I'm glad. Truly. Sienna made a small sound beside her. When Ada looked, her sister was crying silently. They sat with him until the end, which came quietly just after midnight. One moment he was breathing, labored but present. The next, he was gone. Sienna broke down completely. Ada held her sister while she sobbed. This woman she'd spent her whole life competing with and resenting and loving despite everything. I don't know what to do now, Sienna said between sobs. I don't know how to live without someone telling me what to do. You learn, Ada said, the same way I did. I'm not strong like you. You're stronger than you think. You just haven't needed to be. They buried their father 3 days later in the rain. A small ceremony, a few neighbors, some business associates, no one who really knew him. Afterwards, Sienna asked Ada to stay. Just a few more days. To help sort through his things, She stopped. I don't want to be alone here. Ada looked at Cade. He nodded. A few days, Ada agreed. They spent a week going through the house, dividing what little their father had left. Most of it was debt. The house would have to be sold to cover it. What will you do? Ada asked. There's a teaching position at the girls' school. They offered it to me last year, but I turned it down because father said it wasn't suitable. Sienna folded one of their father's shirts. I think I'll take it now. You should. It won't be grand. The pay is modest, but it's honest work. Honest work is good. Ara meant it. On their last night in Philadelphia, Sienna gave Ara a box. Mother's things. You should have them. Inside were letters, jewelry, a few small treasures. At the bottom, a photograph of their mother Ara had never seen before. She was beautiful, Ara said. She was strong, like you. Sienna touched the photograph gently. I wish I'd known her better. Wish she'd lived long enough to teach me how to be strong instead of just pretty. You can still learn. I'm trying, Sienna managed a smile. Maybe someday I'll visit, see this ranch that stole my sister. You'd hate it. Probably. But I'd like to see you happy there? She paused. You are happy, aren't you? Ada thought about it. About the ranch, the work, the life she'd built. About Cade, and whatever it was growing between them. Yeah, she said. I am. The train ride back felt different. Ara sat beside Cade, watching the landscape change from cities back to plains, and felt something settle inside her. You all right? Cade asked. Better than I expected to be. Your father said what he needed to say. It doesn't change anything that happened, but it's... She searched for the word. It's closure. I can let it go now. And your sister? She'll be fine. She's tougher than she looks. She just needs to figure that out for herself. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You were good with her, patient. I wouldn't have been. She's my sister. We don't get to choose family. We just get to choose what we do about it. And what did you choose? Forgiveness. Not for her, really. For me. So I could stop carrying all that anger around. Cade took her hand, the gesture becoming familiar now. You've changed since you first arrived. You're harder, freer. Like you're finally comfortable in your own skin. Ara squeezed his hand. Maybe I am. Took long enough. Wyoming appeared on the horizon 2 days later, vast and empty and beautiful. When the ranch came into view, Ara felt something in her chest expand. Home. She hadn't had one of those before. Not really. Philadelphia had been a place she lived, a place she survived. But it had never been home. This was home. The ranch hands had maintained everything in their absence. The cattle were healthy, the fences were repaired, the barn was clean. Hatch greeted them with his usual gruff efficiency. Place didn't burn down, he said. I can see that, Cade replied. Did you expect it to? With Garrett in charge, little bit. Hatch almost smiled. He did fine. They all did. He looked at Ara. How was Philadelphia? Smaller than I remembered. They usually are. He headed back to the barn. Good to have you back. That night, after the ranch hands had eaten and dispersed, Ara and Cade sat on the porch watching the stars come out. I've been thinking, Cade said. About? About this. Us. The marriage. He turned to look at her. We got married for legal reasons. To save the ranch. To fulfill the contract. But that's done now. The contract's fulfilled. The court case is settled. You could, if you wanted, you could leave. Get an annulment. Start over somewhere else. Ara's heart stuttered. Is that what you want? No. He said it firmly. But I want you to have the choice, a real one this time, not made under pressure or in front of a judge. Just, what do you actually want? Ara looked out at the land stretching away into darkness, thought about everything that had brought her here. The fear, the work, the slow transformation from unwanted substitute to someone who mattered. I want to stay, she said. Not because I have to. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is where I belong, this ranch, this life. She turned to him. You. Cade's expression softened. You mean that? I do, but I need to know, is this still just about the ranch for you, or is it something more? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, When you first arrived, I saw you as a mistake, a problem I needed to solve, but you weren't a mistake. You were exactly right. I just couldn't see it yet. And now? Now I see you, not as a substitute for someone else, not as a worker or a partner or a legal wife, just you. And I want you to stay because I can't imagine this ranch without you. Can't imagine my life without you. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest, and honest was better than any pretty words. Then I'm staying, Ara said. For good. Cade kissed her. Tentative at first, then deeper when she responded. It was their first real kiss, months into their marriage, and it felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. When they finally pulled apart, Ara was smiling. What? Cade asked. Just thinking about how wrong everyone was. My father, Sienna, even you at first. Everyone thought I was the wrong woman for this life. And they were right. I was the wrong woman. She looked at the ranch, at the life she'd built. But I'm not her anymore. I'm exactly who I need to be. The seasons turned. Winter came hard and early, testing everything Ara had learned. She worked beside Cade through freezing mornings and brutal storms, proving over and over that she belonged. Spring brought calving season, sleepless nights, and difficult births. and the satisfaction of watching new life take its first shaky steps. Summer meant long days in the saddle, moving cattle, repairing fences, building something bigger than what they'd had before. And through it all, Ara and Cade grew into their marriage. Not smoothly. They fought about money, about expansion, about whose turn it was to deal with the temperamental cook stove. But they fought as equals, as partners, and they always found their way back to each other. A year after the trial, Ara received a letter from Sienna. Dear Ara, the school year has ended and I find myself with unexpected time to travel. Would you accept a visit? I promise to be a good guest. I won't complain about the lack of society or the presence of livestock. I simply want to see the place that made you choose dirt over civilization. Your sister, Sienna Ara, showed the letter to Cade. What do you think? It's your sister, your choice. I want her to come. I want her to see this, to understand. Then invite her. Sienna arrived in late summer, stepping off the stagecoach in a practical traveling dress that would have shocked their Philadelphia neighbors. She looked around the town, the ranch, the endless sky, and for once kept her opinions to herself. It's bigger than I expected, was all she said. Ara showed her everything, the house, the barn, the corrals, introduced her to Hatch and Garrett and the other hands, let her see the work, the reality, the unglamorous truth of ranch life. On the third day, Sienna helped with dinner preparation. She was terrible at it, burned the beans, oversalted the stew, but she tried. I don't know how you do this, she said, scrubbing a pot. Every day, the same endless work. It's not endless. It's necessary. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Endless work wears you down. Necessary work builds you up. Sienna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I owe you an apology for the trial, for everything before it. I was cruel. You were scared. That's not an excuse. No, but it's an explanation. Ara took the pot from her sister's soapy hands. I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I don't want to carry it anymore. Thank you. Sienna wiped her hands on a towel. For what it's worth, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. You're happy here. I can see it, and She smiled. I'm learning to be happy too, in my own way. The teaching? The teaching, the independence, the life I'm building that's mine, not something someone else chose for me. She looked around the kitchen. It's not as dramatic as yours, but it's enough. Enough is underrated. It really is. Sienna stayed 2 weeks, then returned to Philadelphia with stories to tell and a new understanding of her sister. They would never be close, not the way some siblings were, but they'd found something better than closeness. They'd found respect. 2 years after arriving at the ranch, Ara stood in the north pasture at sunset, watching the cattle graze. Her hands were scarred from rope and work, her skin weathered by sun and wind. She looked nothing like the woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach, terrified and unwanted. She looked like someone who belonged. Cade found her there, wrapping an arm around her waist. What are you thinking about? About how strange life is. How the worst thing that ever happened to me turned into the best thing. Being sent here? Being sent here, being rejected, having to fight for every inch of ground. She leaned into him. All of it. If Sienna had come instead, I'd still be in Philadelphia, invisible, wasted, but she didn't come. I did. And you built something. We built something. She turned to face him. I couldn't have done this alone. Yeah, you could have. You're tougher than you think. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to. She kissed him, soft and sure. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For giving me a chance. For being exactly what I needed, even when neither of us knew it. Cade pulled her closer. You gave me the same thing. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that didn't exist anywhere else, and Ara felt a peace she'd never known before. She wasn't the woman anyone expected. She wasn't the beautiful sister, the obedient daughter, the perfect wife. She was something better. She was herself, scarred, strong, and exactly where she belonged. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than any pretty fiction, worth more than approval or acceptance or love that came with conditions. She'd earned her place in this harsh, beautiful land, earned her partnership with this difficult, honest man, earned her right to stand in this field and call it home. Nobody could take that from her. Not her father's ghost, not her sister's judgment, not her own lingering doubts. She was enough. She had always been enough. She just needed to come to the edge of the world to figure it out. The stars came out one by one, filling the sky with light, and Aravance Mercer, no longer unwanted, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, stood beneath them and knew exactly who she was. It had taken blood and sweat and more courage than she'd known she possessed. But she'd made it. She was home.